Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful having all of you participate in this webinar. And a special thanks to Mr. Rajesh Shanmugam, President of the Tiruppur Exporters Association, for the wonderful keynote address that he just made. And as always, it's wonderful to have Ranjeev, my good friend Ranjeev Sharma of Marks and Spencers, having him present in this webinar with us today. The last few months, we've all been going through some very testing and some interesting phases around the world. Each of the industry has its own experience and what it has actually seen as part of a result of the situation. What we thought we should be doing today in this webinar is presenting a very different perspective as to how we can start looking at this current situation, rather than just look at the doomsday side of it, rather than just look at the numbers and rather than just look at what's not working. We thought it would be a very important step in starting to look at this current situation and starting to understand what we can do to prepare ourselves for the future as an industry. The title for today's webinar is Time for Change, and we hope that this will be an illuminating webinar because we are going to focus more on an apparel manufacturer's perspective, and needless to say, we will be talking about examples, we will be talking about data and information pertaining to apparel manufacturers. I'm not too sure how many of you have heard about the fisherman's philosophy. This philosophy is age-old, and it very clearly denotes the priorities of fishermen during the times when they can actually not go out into the sea due to rough weather. And what we understand is that during the times that they are stuck on land, they actually mend their nets. They actually make their nets more tight and more efficient, so they can actually increase the yield the next time they go out to sea. Interestingly, this philosophy is not just heard back in India with our fishermen, but I was talking to a friend of mine from Norway a few months ago, and he said that the Norwegian fishermen also use this adage as something which they all look up to in terms of prioritizing their time during the season of high tides, when they can actually not go out into the sea. Needless to say, there is a lot of learning for us from this. This means that the time when, at this point in time, when factories have been temporarily closed, we are not able to get back to work now. There is surely a lot that we can actually do, a lot of homework that we can actually do in terms of fixing or mending the nets per se, which will actually help us to become much more effective and efficient when we get back to work. Let me begin this webinar with some good news. The biggest news here is that we are not the only ones who are affected by this present crisis. You name the retailer, you name the country, you name the manufacturer, you name the software developer. Each of these organizations and establishments are affected by this. And one more thing which I have been hearing from many of these global webinars of late is that India is expected to lead the growth trajectory post-crisis. And retailers are not just sitting and twiddling their thumbs. They are also doing a lot of things differently, so they can actually bounce back to business and start attracting customers to their stores. The biggest news of all, which I have been hearing, is that the Make in India is going to be a reality, and businesses definitely are going to be moving away from China. And if we are all able to make the Make in India program a success, then there is no need for us to worry about future business at all. And as we all know and agree, it's going to be a very, very new and a different world from now on. There is not much that we can actually think about the past. The past is past. So let's all work together and prepare ourselves to face the new world. And more good tidings coming our way. There is a lot of improvement that the businesses are seeing world over. As of last week, Gap announced that they are ready to open 800 stores in the US by the end of May. Macy's is to reopen 775 stores in USA by June. They've already started opening stores in some of the states in the USA. Best Buy has already reopened 200 stores, and more of them coming in the near future. Nordstorm has begun to reopen stores. Germany has allowed stores to reopen, especially those stores which are at least 8,000 square feet in size. Denmark, Austria and Norway have already announced retail stores openings. And biggies like the Walmarts and Targets, which have played a very important role in keeping things going and making sure that essential commodities are available. Such biggie stores have actually extended their store hours mainly in the USA. In the last 2 months, I had the opportunity of participating in at least 30 to 35 webinars which were held in different fora around the world. And I attended fora of webinars of retailers, I attended webinars of organizations like Oracle, I attended webinars conducted by consulting companies world over. And what I got to hear is a lot of fantastic information. And what I have done is I have chosen a few of them which are pertinent to us, to the industry in India, and I am presenting it for your knowledge and understanding. World over, people look at India and the Indian manufacturing setup to have very high levels of ability to innovate, and the Indian textile industry is on a strong footing to get a major share in the global export market in the months to come and the years to come. India is in the top 3 countries as chosen or preferred destinations for global funding post this crisis. The global industry appreciates the Indian government's thrust for proactive reforms, and the World Retailer Congress, which is an organization of which all major retailers and brands are members of, they are actually suggesting manufacturers to prepare for the surge demand. The surge demand is what is normally seen as a post-dip situation, wherein the demand for products and services is expected to be double of what it is during the surge, during the low periods. So this basically is a very clear indicator of the fact that we need to be prepared for a huge surge of orders going forward once things start opening up and the industry is back to work. And the reality is something that we all need to appreciate. There is going to be no leaping back to business. We have to actually limp back, which is also a good thing for us, because we can actually slowly and steadily build up systems and prepare ourselves for the comeback. And retailers that are going to be starting to sourcing garments and other accessories will want to work with strategic vendors. Now, these strategic vendors will have to play a very important role in this whole game of a comeback. And in the later slides, I will be talking to you about the definition of a strategic vendor as the retailers see it. Retailers will initially demand smaller orders, smaller quantities with tighter margins, because that's the thumb rule. And the economic stimulus which everybody talks about is good to have, but the reality is that such economic stimulus are acid bubbles, which are very difficult to understand and appreciate. So what I would like to stress upon the fact is that we cannot wait for the economic stimulus to come in. We need to do our bit. Whenever such economic stimulus and packages are announced by the government of the country, it's going to be a bonus. One more important thing that we all need to realize and appreciate and understand is that this is the time when your employees and customers will be at the peak of their anxiety levels. So we need to be empathetic to such anxieties, and we need to do a lot of things differently so we are able to convince them and hold them back in spite of the fact that they are anxious about the current situation. Another very interesting and important thing we all need to understand is that there is no single model that can be applied to all the manufacturing facilities world over. There has to be each factory, and each factory looking at its own model. It's going to be very I should say self-sufficient and self-subservient for manufacturers. And needless to say, each company and factory around the world has to undergo change, positive change. As a manufacturer, we have two options right in front of us. One is, of course, to wait for the government stimulus or the government package, wait for the buyers to come and offset our losses, or wait for things to come back to normal, or even wait for buyers to come and tell us what to do. But my strong recommendation is that we should not be waiting for all this to happen. We should rather start taking action. We should start fixing our business models. We should start improving processes, skills and capabilities in our own companies. We should start looking at methods by which we become more competitive, and we should be proactive in going back to our buyers and telling them that we are ready for the journey ahead. More often than not, it's human and natural tendency to wait for somebody to come and bail us out, somebody to come and help us to come out of a situation. But believe me, this waiting game is not going to happen, because just like you, the retailers and brands are also looking at what action they can take so they can improve their business. So we have to spring back into action and start doing things which will make our business much more competitive. As I was mentioning to earlier on, the time is now for retailers and brands to identify their strategic vendors. All these years, if you look at a typical factory in Tiruppur, it's either been between an approved vendor or a preferred vendor. An approved vendor who has just passed an audit and very transactional in relationship with the buyer. Whereas a preferred vendor is somebody with an ongoing relationship who has gone beyond operational relationships and is assured of orders for the next season or two. But the need of the hour is for all of us to move into this strategic vendor mode, because this is where we strike active partnership with our clients and customers, which are the retailer and buyers. And once you move into a position of a strategic vendor, you start sharing a vision with them, you start sharing a strategy with them, you start sharing values with them, which is of absolute importance. And once you become a strategic vendor, you also get to start sharing management practices and systems, you start sharing communications with them, and needless to say, you also start sharing risks with them. And once you are a strategic vendor, the probabilities are high that a retailer or brand, a customer of yours, start sharing investments also with you in terms of projects. My sincere suggestion and request to all of us in this webinar and to the other factories who are not in this webinar today is to start working towards the journey when we move towards being a strategic supplier to our vendors. If any of you have more questions on these points, we are always available to you. After this webinar, you could actually pick up the phone, call us or write to us, and we can actually provide you with further information on how we can actually move into being a strategic vendor to our customers. As manufacturers, obviously there is a lot that we have to do in terms of taking responsibility for this change. As manufacturers, I think this is the right time to go back to the basics, wherein we could revamp all systems, take a relook at all your policies, procedures and your actual ways of working. In fact, this I would go on to the extent of saying that this is also the right time to relook your business model itself. Because by actually going back to the basics, let's look at each and every aspect of your business that needs to be, or that could be upgraded or altered to suit the current needs. Needless to say, rebuilding teams, restructuring your organization, and eliminating waste. This is super important, because every penny that you save is a penny earned. That is the situation right now. Nobody is going to pay us an extra cent or a dollar for anything that we do. So it's all about reducing waste, or I would say eliminating waste for that matter. Looking after your employees, because they are the ones who actually look after your business. In fact, many times your employees may know more about your customer than even you would. So I think this is the right time to make sure that our employees are taken care of well. And this is also the time for getting away with obsolete mindsets, obsolete methods, and obsolete behavior, which is definitely something that needs to go away. We can no longer think about the past. We can no longer continue to do the same mistakes that we were doing earlier on. So I think we need to press the reset button on our entire thinking method of doing business. Another very important element is proactive communications with your customers and employees, because customers always like to hear from you. It is not that the customers are always just waiting to hear bad news from you. We could always proactively share our strategy and our change management programs with our customers. And also, as we go ahead developing systems and changing things in your factories, we can actually look at adding more retailers and brands, bringing in newer customers. And all said and done, your primary objective is to reposition yourself as a strategic vendor. Just an also ran manufacturer is no longer going to help you at all. You have to become a strategic vendor, and that's exactly what is going to be the most important factor that will decide your success. And last but not the least, innovate. I mean, the more you innovate, the more you can actually add on to your capabilities and capacities, and add more value to your customers and to your employees as well. Now, considering that most of us in this webinar, most of the participants are either owners of the business or are in leadership roles in your companies, and as leaders you have a very big role to play in this change. And believe me, this is going to be the biggest leadership test for you. All you have to do is start abandoning assumptions about the business. Carry no assumptions whatsoever. If something worked in the past, make sure you believe that it's not going to work again. Also the time to unlearn and relearn, which means that as leaders we have to ramp up our capabilities and our skills and our thinking methods. We need to work like a startup. We all know what a startup is, how the startup founders actually put in 17-18 hours a day. They are always on the drawing board trying to understand what may work, what may not work, trying out new methods, trying out a new dimension of thinking, and so on and so forth. So each of us garment manufacturers should become like a startup. And during this time of crisis, you have to manage yourself and you have to manage others as well. Let's not forget that managing others is not just who is a leader. Managing self also is a very important element for a successful leader. Also, we need to be authentic and courageous to change. If you are not authentic, people can actually see through you. Your customers can actually very easily see through your thought process and your objective. So the more authentic you are and the more courageous you are, change is definite to happen. And we need to demonstrate adaptability, flexibility, empathy, and humility. And more than anything else, take ownership for the positive change. As Redefine Management Services, we are a company that has an amazing panel of international consultants and we work on all aspects of the business. Our core area of work and function is business transformation. We help companies to become more effective, efficient, and competitive. We can actually work with you and your teams on all areas of your business, right from the human resource side, the production management side, the quality management side, inventory. We could even help you with financial analysis if required. So, what we would like to offer this group and all the other manufacturers in India is that we are open to conducting webinars and seminars on any subject. You need to name the subject, and we have our people ready to sharing thoughts, knowledge, and wisdom on that. And we would also love to work with you inside your factory, so that we can actually handhold you and your team and help your company to become a strategic vendor to your customers and suppliers. We are just a call away. Just reach out to us, and we are more than happy to be working with companies of any size and any sort. In fact, we work with not just the apparel business, we work with almost 17 different types of industries. That's where we bring all our strength and knowledge and wisdom from. And we are more than willing to share our knowledge and wisdom with you and help you in making you a strategic vendor to your customers. Before we wind up, I would like to remind you or revisit this fisherman philosophy. Now, being the rough weather, I think this is the time when each of us need to mend our nets. Let's not misuse or waste this time by speculating and waiting for the good times to come. Let us get to work, let us mend the nets, so that when you are back to business, you can actually maximize your yield. Lastly, let's all work together and make in India. Thank you so much for being with us on this webinar, and I look forward to talking to you in the next webinar, which is going to be coming very soon. Thank you, and all the best to you.